Hi, it's Mary. Have you ever baked a homemade apple pie all by yourself? Well, today, that's what I will be doing in my kitchen. And I would like to invite you to join me. Now, today when I do my pie, I want to share with you some tips on the most stress-free way to bake an apple pie. And that includes some shortcuts, but you're still going to have that homemade effect for your pie for the holidays. So come along with me and we will get started. We have a very small list of ingredients that we will be using, and I'm going to begin with the toppings. So I have a small bowl here, and in this bowl I'm going to place ingredients for topping for the first topping, let's say, for the apples. And just grabbing my recipe here. And that will include 1/2 cup of sugar and 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. So I have my 1/2 cup measuring cup, and I'll just place that in there in the small bowl. And then I have my teaspoon, and I'm going to grab my cinnamon. And I love this teaspoon because it has a regular shaped teaspoon, and then it has this narrow one, which is fantastic for getting into these small spice bottles. And you can measure out your 1 teaspoon. And I'm just going to use my teaspoon here to do the mixing. And I'm just going to mix the cinnamon into the sugar. Now that's ready to go. My second part of this recipe is in this larger metal bowl. I will place 1/2 cup of sugar. So I'm going to use my 1/2 cup again. Then I will need 3/4 of a cup of flour. Now, for you all who do not have gluten problems, you can use regular white flour. But because I prefer eating less gluten, I just feel better when I do, I have cut a lot of gluten out of my diet. And I also have a daughter who has celiac disease, and she cannot eat gluten at all. So when I make any baked goods, really any type of cooking, I have learned to substitute. And in this case, I'm going to be using this Bob's Red Mill all-purpose baking flour. This is fantastic for this kind of recipe. So keep this in mind if you have any gluten problems in your family. So I will just open up this little bag of flour and place in this cup, 3/4 of a cup. That is pretty precisely 3/4 of a cup. So I'm going to add that in to my bowl. And then I have my pastry cutter here, and I'm going to use it just to combine the flour and the sugar. All right, done. So my next step is to add 1/3 of a cup of butter, and you want your butter to be cold, not frozen, of course, but chilled, and you want it to not be too soft. And we'll just pour that into the bowl, and we will do what is called cutting the butter in, and we'll use our pastry cutter. So what we will be doing is cutting it in, and I'm going to turn this down so maybe you can see a bit better this process. And you will notice that the butter gets kind of caught up into the pastry cutter, but that's okay. It will work its way out as you go forward. All right, so I would like to show you the results of cutting in the butter. You have a sort of a crumbly texture, and those bits of butter that are in this topping are going to melt and combine this all together as your apple pie bakes, and it's going to make a lovely crumb topping. I have completed peeling all of my apples, and now I am in the process of cutting them into quarters, and then you will see that I am starting to core them, because of course no one wants seeds or parts of the core in their apple pie. All right, I have preheated my oven to 400 degrees, and I have gotten out my pre-made gluten-free crust by Yum Bana. I'm going to open up the package. And I will place the crust right here. And as you can see here, I have a large pile of my apples ready to be sliced and placed into my pie pan. Now I just take each quarter of the Honeycrisp apple and I just slice it straight into the pan. And you know, apples can tend to start turning brown the longer they sit out after they're peeled. So one of the reasons why I prepare my toppings first is to stop that from happening, or I have enough time to get the apples peeled and cored, sliced into my pie pan. I put the toppings on quickly and pop it straight into the oven. And this way, whoopsie, this way I avoid the problem of the apples browning. Just be organized and you won't have any trouble with that at all. So I'm just going to continue here slicing in my apples until my pie pan is completely full, and I'll show you that in just a minute. Here's my pie ready to be topped, and you can see I have the apples piled up very high. And the reason I do that is because apples tend to bake down, and when this pie is finished baking in the oven, you will see in the final product that the apples are way down low compared to right now while they are still raw. So first we're going to add our cinnamon sugar topping, and we'll just sprinkle it on very quickly. It's something that doesn't have to be done too precisely, although you do kind of want to get all of the edges, just like that. And it's going to spill over onto your counter. That's okay. You can clean it up in just a bit. right, so our topping is done. We'll just sprinkle on the rest. So this is the sweetener, and it's going to give that cinnamon flavor to your apples. Now next, we're going to add the crumb topping. And as Ina Garten always has said, clean hands are the cook's best friend. I love that quote because, of course, I do use my hands a lot when I'm cooking and baking. So we're going to just use our hands, and we're going to come in here and scoop out some of this crumb topping and place it on top. And on the edges, because I have such a tall pile of apples here, I'm actually going to take my hand and lay it on that edge and sort of spread it upward to the top of the pie. That way, everything will be covered with the crumb topping. And the beauty of this crumb topping is no pie dough making, no rolling out, no trying to figure out, how thick to roll the crust, how thin to roll the crust. We'll sprinkle on the rest on the top, and I have a clean counter here. So I'm going to take some of this topping that fell off and just put it into the middle of my pie. Make sure it's sort of spread around evenly. And there it is. Your pie is ready to bake. Isn't that amazing? I didn't have to use a rolling pin. I used my pre-made gluten-free crust, or you can also opt to use a normal frozen pie crust. I did my crumb topping, and wait till you see the results. You will just be amazed. So time to pop it into the oven. Apple pies have been known to bubble over in the oven and make a big mess in the bottom of your oven. So to avoid that, a quick solution is to take an old cookie sheet, line it with aluminum foil, and place your pie on top. And now let's pop our pie into the oven. I have set my timer for 40 minutes. Now, I usually bake my pie for 1 hour, but I always set it for 40 minutes so that I can check on the crust, because the edges of the crust can tend to get burnt before the apples are completely cooked through. So if you check it partway through the baking time and you see the crust getting a little bit too dark, you can fix that problem with aluminum foil. And here is my completed apple pie. Doesn't it look simply scrumptious? And I wanted to share with you how using an old cookie sheet can save you a lot of oven cleanup. You can see that my pie has sort of bubbled over and splattered some, so I'm saving myself some time cleaning my oven later. And there you are, a delicious apple pie with this absolutely fantastic crumb crust that I think you and your family will really enjoy. Hi guys, I'm back with my baked apple pie, homemade, with a few shortcuts. And if you remember earlier, I mentioned that I piled up my apples really tall till they were almost spilling out. And as it baked down, you can see now it is just the right size, so my pie does not look skimpy. And another tip for you is when you're using a shortcut like the pie shell that I purchased, and whether it doesn't matter whether it is gluten-free or not, you know, it comes in that aluminum pie pan. And if you place it in a nice pie pan that you own, like this is a Longaberger one that I've had for a long time, and if you place it in there, it just looks a little nicer, more homemade. So I hope you enjoy this recipe and give it a try. It's a great thing to share for the Christmas holidays. So long.